Okay, guys, we're going to get started here. Just give you a few minutes for everyone to get in the room. And I'm sharing my screen now, so you should be able to see on the Hangouts. And I'm recording this as well for anyone who can't make it. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I want to spend a bit of time, first of all, just going back through the strategy. I've pretty much done calls with everyone in the group so far, so you should all be on the same page. But obviously, we're all starting out with sort of different levels of experience with cryptos and trading and stuff. So the basic sort of strategy I put together is something that anyone can really do as sort of a baseline, and then you can sort of tweak this depending on how much experience you have and how much time you have in terms of how many coins you want to invest in and ICOs you want to follow and things like that. But this is the basic sort of strategy. So this is the sample portfolio I put together as well in the group. You should all have access to this one. And like I mentioned, there's three basic buckets here. So I'm going to go over these again, just make sure you're already clear on how this works in terms of how to set this up, so you guys can actually start implementing. I think most of you have started doing these things already. So hopefully, by sort of this week, you have your portfolios more or less ready, and then obviously you can add to them as we go ahead and find new coins and things like that we want to invest in. So this table is basically showing the three different buckets. The first one is this safe currencies bucket. So, like I mentioned, this is the sort of coins that have been around for the longest, have the most trust, relative to other coins in the space. So, obviously, Bitcoin is the first one there. We've got Ethereum, Dash, Monero. These are the ones I sort of call Wave 1 alts. So, when crypto market cap really started growing, from 10 billion to 100 billion this year, that growth was really all driven by the altcoins. Obviously, Bitcoin went up as well, but Bitcoin as a percentage of the whole market cap, fell quite a bit from 90% to 40, 50%. So all the growth really came from the Wave 1 alts and some of the newer coins as well now. And so these, again, I would consider them the most trusted. They've been around for years. They all have a slightly different use case and utility value. So, Ethereum's obviously at the infrastructure layer I mentioned. You have different layers now with crypto emerging. You have sort of pure payment currencies, then you have sort of infrastructure layer coins, and a lot of growth is happening on these layers. So then application coins and tokens like Veritasium are being programmed into Ethereum blockchain. So this is really where I see a lot of growth happening, and that's why I have some Ethereum personally. Dash is more like a mainstream payment currency. It's a lot easier to use than Bitcoin. It's a lot faster as well for microtransactions, so that's why I have it in my portfolio. They do a great job with their branding and marketing for the sort of mass market. Monero is the last one I have an example here in this portfolio, because for me, I think privacy is going to be a big issue again in the next few years. So Monero is just currently the most established privacy coin, if you like. And there are other coins that do privacy. This is just my selection based on my research. So like I said, I try and pick the best in class. So for me, I think Monero has the best positioning right now in terms of privacy coins among the safe currencies, if you like. So that kind of makes up the first bucket. That's a third, a third of your investment goes into that. So let's say, you have, like I said, some of you guys, let's say you have $100,000. You take 10% of that, for example, you put that into cryptos. How do you split that 10,000 up? So the first bucket here would be a third, so about 3,300 will go into these currencies. I've weighted them all evenly here in terms of, the four coins here, about 8.25% each. You can do it higher or lower depending on your confidence, your understanding, or what you think is going to perform better. So I kind of mentioned in the post, in the Slack channel recently, that I think Dash and Litecoin are doing actually really well right now, considering the market is pulling back. Dash and Litecoin are actually at their highs, and so that kind of relative strength is very interesting to me. That's something that kind of tells me that's something I think those two coins will outperform the rest in terms of the safe currencies on the next move up. Obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum do well generally, but you may want to weight those coins differently depending on what your view is, in terms of long term. So this is something that gives you, exposure to the whole space. You don't really have to watch these. These are some coins you just buy and hold. An example here, we actually bought, when I put these coins and this spreadsheet together, we were actually buying it at the top of the market, so we weren't even trying to time the entries and exits. And so you can actually do a lot better in terms of returns if you can wait until, the coin and the market is sort of bottoming and then buy in there. And I've given some kind of tips on terms of the entries for Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of these coins. So this is just an example. If you just literally bought and hold everything on the first day without checking anything, without having any experience, this would be your current returns from a few weeks back when we put this together. So I'll come through that in a minute in terms of how the portfolio is doing. That's the first bucket. like I said, you can hold those on cold wallets. You don't need to have them on the exchanges because you're not buying in and selling. You're not trading in and out of these positions. These are pretty core holding positions. So it's just to give you exposure to the space. You don't need to be holding them on exchanges because when they're on the exchange, there is that extra third-party risk that I've mentioned to you guys. So that kind of covers the first bucket. The second bucket is more as a sort of speculative coins. So these may be coins that haven't been around as long and don't have as much of a history and maybe not so much trust as some of the safe currencies. But in terms of their potential, like I mentioned, all the growth happening now is really at the infrastructure and application layers. So some of these coins are very well positioned to do very clever things that haven't been invented yet. So this is really the leading edge of what's happening in cryptocurrencies. And in terms of the upside from here, I think some of these coins will do much better in percentage gains. Bitcoin's already had 30,000% gains. Ethereum's already had really big moves up. So their moves are they will keep growing, but maybe not as explosively as some of these speculative coins, which are much newer and have much more potential, but also I guess are less known and less recognized. So if you can get in early and you find the right coins, you can do very well. So I actually hold quite a few. This is just again an example of some of the sort of 3 or 4 coins that I hold. So I put 3 in this bucket here: AntShares, Veritasium, and Humanique. So again, I've posted in the sort of group, in the Slack channel, why I hold these coins. To me, what I look for again is trying to find coins that are kind of similar to what has already been established in the market. So let me give you an example. The market's already said Ethereum's going to have potential because of what it can do for the whole space in terms of that infrastructure layer is going to have lots of applications being built into it, lots of demand, lots of companies raising ICOs through Ethereum. So I look at that as an example. I think, okay, what could be the next Ethereum? What's at that infrastructure layer? What could do the same thing but maybe differently or maybe better? And try and find these sort of junior analog coins. So coins that have a kind of similar use case but maybe slightly different potential. And so AntShares would be a good example of that. It's kind of similar to Ethereum. It's that infrastructure layer. Decentralized applications can all be run on top of it. But specifically, this one is for the Chinese market. So it's a Chinese run project. Obviously, it's going to be localized for that market. And if you look at where all the cryptocurrency sort of volume in terms of capital is coming in from, a lot of it is from China. In fact, most of it right now. And so I think if you think of a coin that could do really well, for me, AntShares is a great example because it could be just like Ethereum, but the Chinese market really understands it. Again, a lot of this stuff is speculative. If they even think it's going to do well and it starts to take off, you just see that kind of rush and that kind of hype. So I think it has good long-term fundamentals, but also in terms of its short-term appeal, if this goes on an exchange, like a big exchange, I think right now it's only on Bittrex and a few other exchanges. But if it goes on a big Chinese exchange, for example, I think it's happening next week with AntShares, then you can see a lot more volume come into the market. A lot more people can actually now buy the coin, and then you can start to see that demand pick up. So I like to kind of pick these coins early before they get too popular. This one's already had some moves up. It was sitting around $7 when we added it to the portfolio. So obviously, it's already had quite a big move up from where it was, a couple of years ago, for example. And for the wave 2 alts, I call these the wave 2 alts, the ones that haven't had their huge moves up yet, but have just started to move around June. And you see that some of these coins really took off in June and took out their previous highs. So to me, that is kind of an indication of, yes, there is some demand, some awareness in terms of staying power and longevity for these coins, because they've been around a long time, and now they're taking out new highs and keeping, keep growing. So I will then wait to see, okay, on a retrace of that second move that took out, all the highs, it start to retrace, and when it retraces about 56%, that's when I'll try to start accumulating. So again, these are long-term buy and hold positions. You don't have to do a lot of work beyond the initial research, trying to understand, what is the new project coming out. Some of these are very new. Some of these have been around for a couple of years. I would put AntShares as sort of a wave 2 alt. It's been around a while, but it's actually being rebranded at the moment to Neo as well. So that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to look for it. But basically, it's taken out the highs. It's now retraced about 50-60%. So now I'm starting to accumulate. And so that's an example. I think it will do very well, just like Ethereum, once it takes off in the Chinese market and the rest of the market cap goes up again. So that's the first example. Veritasium I've talked about a lot in the group. I'm not going to go through that much here. It's had really good gains sort of last week or so, but it is quite volatile. It's still very new. It's not traded on any exchanges, like big exchanges, so it's only on Ether Delta at the moment, which is good and it's a good and bad thing because it's a little bit tricky to get your hands on, which means the mass market hasn't got it in yet. That also means I think there's an opportunity here because it hasn't had the big pump and dump. Once it goes onto a main exchange that everyone can access, you're going to see all the volume come in. You'll see that big pump and dump. It may be harder to buy in then at a price that's reasonable because you don't want to be chasing the highs. So today I just posted a an update on that coin in the group that has had a pullback, and again, I like to try and buy in on pullbacks. So I think it's about 35% off the highs right now. So that's a coin I'm saying I would add at this point.